Electricity prices in Ontario have doubled over the past decade. People point fingers at renewables, aging infrastructure, cancelled gas plants, and bad energy deals. Is it possible to limit the increase in prices or even lower them? The fate of this Ontario government may lie in finding the answer to that question. Let's get into this with Todd Wilcox. He is chair of the Electricity Distributors Association and president and COO of North Bay Hydro. Vince Brescia, president and CEO, Ontario Energy Association. Sarah Petrovan, senior policy advisor, Clean Energy Canada. Brady Yauk, executive director and economist, Consumer Policy Institute. And Steve Applin, vice president, energy and environment at the HDP Group. That's an Ottawa management consultancy. Great to have all of you in our studio here for a timely and relevant discussion about Ontario's electricity prices, which once again were front and center recently, thanks to Prime Minister Trudeau. This may be a provincial issue, but it knows no jurisdictional boundaries. Town Hall, Peterborough, Ontario. Somebody took on the PM. Roll it, please.
I feel like you have failed me, and I'm asking you here today to fix that. Something's wrong now, Mr. Joe. My heat and hydro now cost me more than my mortgage. I now not only work 75 hours a week, I stay and work 15 hours a day, just so I don't lose my home.
Let us now share some numbers that a November poll conducted by Nanos Research found, and these are unprompted responses, and you would not have seen this a decade ago. Hydro rates, the number one important provincial issue of concern for 1 out of every 5 Ontarians, ahead of healthcare, ahead of jobs in the economy, ahead of taxation, education, and the list goes on. Sarah, to you first. How much of a struggle, based on your knowledge, is it truly for Ontarians as it relates to the cost of electricity these days?
I think Ontarians are feeling the squeeze. I think, electricity rates have risen at a disproportionate rate to what most Ontarians feel is fair, and they're feeling squeezed. And I think, given the context of just overall bills increasing, hydro, really it is electricity, not just hydro, because hydro is just one form of electricity.
Yeah, we should just take 10 seconds to explain that. Hydro is just water, right?
Yeah, hydro is just water power, right? Hydro is hydro dams, and for whatever reason, and I think it's because we used to call it, Ontario Hydro, Hydro One, Toronto Hydro. Hydro's just one form, and it's a legacy name that's left over. But what it is it's actually electricity.
The cost of electricity.
The cost of electricity.
By any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Ontarians are feeling the squeeze. They're saying we can't do this anymore.
Brady, maybe you can put this into some kind of historical perspective, because we do hear that there are a lot of people nowadays who can't pay the bill. More than ever? As many as ever? What's your sense on that?
The OEB just recently released some data, and it said it's gone up in double-digit percentages over the last couple of years of people who are in arrears or behind on their monthly hydro bill. So it's certainly become an issue. It's not just a small group of people complaining about what's happened. And that poll, that poll should be astounding if you're a politician. This is a utility. Utilities are boring. It's a topic most people don't care about. But Ontario, it's surpassed health and education, the two kind of stalwarts of government programs, as the biggest concern in Ontario. So if you were a politician, you look at that and you think, we really did something wrong to catapult this above all these other concerns.
We hear a new expression, actually, Steve. We hear the expression energy poverty, that there are more people than ever in it. Explain what that means, if you would, and tell us rural versus urban. Where is it worse?
Well, it would be worse. It's just worse if the rural poor have it worse than the urban poor, as grinding and undignified as urban poverty is. It's worse in rural areas. Energy poverty is this woman in Peterborough, a $1,000 electricity bill. If you're used to a $200 electricity bill, and if you're on a fixed income, if you don't have much leeway either way, then $1,000 is going to really hurt. When you wake up in the morning and it's -10 outside, you know that that's going to cost you money. You have to maintain the temperature inside your house. It's a matter literally of life and death in this part of the world. If you have to pay through the nose for something that you absolutely need and have no choice but to use, it's going to cause problems in your household budget. And that's what the woman was voicing with the Prime Minister.
Todd, first of all, thank you for making the long trek from North Bay to be with us tonight. What are your customers telling you in North Bay?
Well, the average bill for a customer in Ontario is about $140 a month. And you relate that to a cell bill or a satellite TV bill or what's your monthly natural gas bill. For customers, some customers, it is affordable. For those that are challenged, though, the bill increased significantly, say from $100 a few years ago a month to $140. I hear two things, and in my day job, we handle hundreds of customers a week that come in and pay a bill, or we talk to them on the phone. And what they tell us is two things. First of all, I can't control my bill. I've done everything I can possible in my home. I put in LED lights, I put in new thermostats, but my bill keeps going.
I conserve, I don't waste power.
I don't waste power. I'm very responsible as a user, and I can't get that bill down no matter what I do. And it's a sense of almost despair and frustration. And the other challenge we hear is nobody's listening to me. My bill's going up, I'm paying more and more, I'm mad about it, but nobody's doing anything about it. And we hear those frustrations on a daily basis.
That's the individual ratepayer. What about, Vince, in your world, do you hear from businesses who may be of the view that the cost of electricity is too high and I have to leave, or I'm not going to set up that business I might otherwise have done?
Steve, there's definitely a lot of that going on. However, what I would say about all of this discussion that we're having is we need a little context to how big a problem is. It's interesting you raised the polling. This has turned into a gigantic political issue. It's quite disproportionate to the actual impact that most Ontarians have experienced. The typical electricity bill is 1.6% of the average household's expenditures. And over time, that actually hasn't changed a lot because the average income of the typical household. And if you look over the past 10 years, natural gas prices have dropped dramatically. So for those who have access to natural gas, their net expenditures in energy have gone down. And the same for a lot of businesses. So over time, for the average person, so something else is going on. Electricity has become a totem. It's become representative of people's angst about the political management of the system. And a lot of public profile about some of the management of the system has sapped people's confidence, I believe, in the management of electricity.
This suggests this is more a political problem than a financial problem for people?
For some people, and as mentioned, people like rural customers or people who have electric heat who don't have access to the natural gas I just talked about, they have really been hit hard. So there really is a public policy issue that we need to deal with. We need to deal with rural customers, and we need to deal with people who are poor, who are having difficulty managing this change. For a lot of others, it's actually been quite a manageable change, although nobody's ever happy to see a bill go up.
Well, here's the physical manifestation of what you've just been referring to. Let's bring this up if we can, Sheldon. Ontario's rising energy prices. This is what the Consumer Price Index has been doing. That's the bottom line, the turquoise line. And there's the price of electricity over the last 10 years or more, which, as you can see, particularly in the right-hand side of the graph, has really marched north in the last few years. In your view, Vince, what accounts for that?
Well, the numbers are very clear in terms of what led to the prices. You can look at the ISO data from...
That's the Independent Electricity System Operator.
Independent Electricity System Operator. Between 2006 and 2015, in inflation-adjusted dollars, there was about $5 billion in new costs added to our electricity system. So it's now about a $20 billion system. And what made that up? The vast majority of that, of the things that drove the cost up, about 82% of it was on the generation side. It's the cost of producing the energy. There were some costs for distribution, which is the local distribution companies, about $600 million, and some for conservation. Those were the things that account for the increases, and actually some decreases in taxation, because we went from having the HST added to the PST removed most recently. But you net that all out, the entire story is about what happened with generation, the cost of producing the commodity. And it's a pretty deep dive to go into. There's another longer story, what led to all those increases.
I get it, but I think, Steve, one of the things that we want to, I suspect the thing that people want to know most of all is it the fault of this current Liberal government and the decisions they made over the past 13 years that finds us in the pickle we are in? Or it didn't matter who was in power, these costs were going to have to be incurred, and these guys happen to be there, and so they're wearing it?
No. It's the first. We didn't need to bring in overpriced electricity to the degree that we didn't need to bring it in, period. It wouldn't have happened in the days of the old rationally planned vertically integrated utility. We rammed high-cost solar, high-cost wind into this system for political reasons. So that's unequivocal. So there's. But
that represents what, 1% of how much electricity is
more
used in the province?
More than you think, because there's Vince was referring to the ISO, the system operator, and they're reporting. They don't report embedded output. The embedded output is actually the lion's share of solar, and that's very high-priced electricity. We're going from 29 cents to 80 cents a kilowatt hour. That's outlandish. There's and there's an awful lot of wind as well, 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour. There's no economic rationale to bring those kinds of sources in. It was brought in under an economic rationale or an environmental rationale, but the cost for avoiding a ton of carbon using those sources is just astronomically greater than the other sources that we've been using for traditionally. Hydro, as Sarah was talking about, and mostly nuclear.
Sarah, you want to come back on that?
So, I mean, do I think that the government made all of the correct choices when it came to renewables? No, I don't think so. Do I agree with everything that you're saying? I also don't agree with everything you're saying. 80 cents a kilowatt hour is for certain projects in the early days of the FIT contracts.
Hasn't been that in a long time,
but,
right?
But it's 30 to 80 cents.
Right.
30 is not justifiable either.
However,
much less 80 cents.
And just because this government chose different contracting rates doesn't necessarily mean that the price of solar in this jurisdiction or in other jurisdictions isn't actually competitive with other forms of electricity now. I think the other thing that we need to say is, like, yes, we can talk about, input, output, distribute numbers, not distribute numbers. Solar and wind make up relatively small amounts of our electricity generation.
But the cost, they make up a disproportionately large amount of the cost.
They make up about $21 on our bill.
They make up
about 21 bucks.
That's right.
So
they have a higher proportion of cost than they do of electricity generation, which tells you one thing. It tells you that they're overpriced.
So I'm not disagreeing with you that the government may have not come into lucrative contracts, but I also don't think it's fair to sit there and say that that's the only poor contracting decision that this government made.
There are a number of poor contracts, but this
let's
is
show
the
you
largest.
what happens here. Hang on, but before we go any further, Sheldon, let's bring this next graphic up. This is number 3, because when you flip the lights on, here's how you are in fact doing it. Nuclear is basically what this province depends on for baseload power. These are relatively new numbers here. More than 60% of the generation of electricity in this province is done by nuclear power plants, and you know where they are in Ontario: Bruce, Pickering, etc., Darlington. A quarter is hydroelectrically produced. Gas and oil make up a little bit more than 6%. Wind makes up a little bit better than 6%. Biofuel, a tiny percentage. And of course, what you don't see on that list anymore is coal. We have no more coal-fired generating stations producing electricity in the province of Ontario. Should we flip over to number 4? Let's take a look at what the standard Hydro One bill is for medium-density residential consumers who use about 750 kilowatts per hour per month. We're trying to make this as average as possible, and you guys can have a fight with us afterwards as to whether or not we got Mr. and Mrs. Everyday Ontario right here. Okay, about half of your electricity bill is for the generation of the electricity you use. You see that in the top left portion there. However, look at the distribution and transmission charge. Even if you never turn the lights on ever, that 37 cents out of every dollar is going to come into your, is going to be on your bill every month. And then you've got regulatory costs, taxes, and other costs as well, which make up, again, another small part of it. Now, who wants to fight with any of what we've got there? Brady, go ahead.
So first I would say that the current run-up in prices for electricity is firmly on the hands of the government. They sometimes say, oh, we inherited a system on the verge of collapse. And they spin this narrative of that Ontario was about to have all its lights turned out in 2003, and they came in and saved the day. That's not true.
There is some truth to the fact that the system needed upgrading.
Sure, every system needs upgrading.
Okay.
I think every single distributor and transmitter would agree with that, but it wasn't. The reliability statistics back in 2003 and where they are now are largely the same. They've shifted a little bit, but there hasn't been a noticeable increase in how much your lights stay on compared to they used to be. So the province needs to admit that it was their decisions that led to the major price increases.
Vince.
Steve, I have a different perspective than a couple of our panelists on this. All 3 political parties back in the day, back in the early 2000s, promised to get out of coal. It was a popular thing for Ontarians. The best data I've been able to find is that the coal was running at about 3.5 cents, maybe even a little less than 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour.
Cheap, cheap, cheap.
Cheap, cheap, cheap. But we wanted cleaner air, and all three parties agreed with that decision.
And no smog days now that we've got rid of coal.
And we have some healthcare benefits. So, you know, there's a lot to support in the decision. However, no matter which political party had been in power, no matter which, there would have been a very large, that was 20, you had the pie chart you mentioned, 25% of our power used to come from coal. So we had 3.5 cents, let's say, for argument purposes. The next, if we'd gone, let's say we'd had perfect management of the system, the next lowest cost probably was going to be, for any other technology, was probably going to bring us somewhere around 8 cents or something. We were going to have a significant increase in our bills. So, you know, some panelists made, there is no way that there was anything that was going to come in and replace coal at 3. That is probably by far and away the largest impact. The green is getting, the renewables are getting a disproportionate share of the blame for the cost increase, in my opinion.
There is a difference, though, of going from 3 cents a kilowatt hour to 8 cents a kilowatt hour compared to 3 cents a kilowatt hour to 80.
Agreed.
Okay.
But the 80 is the 80 is a very tiny portion of what you're seeing in there.
Then let's go to 13.5. There's a big difference between 3.5 and 13.5. It's unjustifiable.
But what he's saying, he's sort of taking aim at what you're saying, which is you're putting this squarely on the Liberals, and he's saying it didn't matter who's going to be in power, this was going to happen.
Well, the history of the sector since the Liberals came in and phased out coal, we phased out coal using nuclear and some natural gas. We did not phase it out using any of these overpriced sources that I'm talking about. They were absolutely unnecessary to both achieving the carbon reductions that we achieved from 2003 to 2013. They played no role whatsoever in this. So that kind of proves that they were unnecessary. And if they're unnecessary and they're coming in at 13 cents a kilowatt hour at the cheapest and going northward from there, I don't see any economic rationale for this other than that
Let me get
popular.
Brady and then Todd.
There are states all across the United States and utilities that relied heavily on coal and have switched to natural gas, and their rates in many cases are actually going down. It's because natural gas prices have gone down, producing power from natural gas has become cheaper. So the narrative that getting rid of coal, that explains all the rate increase doesn't actually play out when you compare to other utilities.
I didn't say all. A big chunk of what happened is
Todd, then
explained by
Sarah.
coal.
Yeah, I think it's entirely convenient to put this all on the backs of provincial politicians. In reality, it's more complex than that. And if you look at Ontario, what's happened, the consumption of electricity is decreased to almost 10% in the last few years. So we have—
Because of the recession, I assume.
Through the recession and conservation, and very effective conservation programs delivered to customers, which help them reduce their consumption, which is a big driver of bill. You have rate and consumption, and that equals the total bill. So we get that consumption down, that really reduces the impact. So I think that's been a significant factor in cost in Ontario.
So that explains why we generate more than we need right now.
In times, because you need to have a lot of capacity there, because people turn things on and off at will. And you don't want to be short, and you need a good safe margin. So hence there's a fair bit of generation capacity required. I think the second factor, though, is that, and it's almost that we have these rates that people don't understand what goes on with rates, and you know what really drives the rate structure. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there. People get confused very easily by what's happening in the sector, and it's very convenient to paint a certain target. But there's been a lot of infrastructure renewal requirements in this province, a lot of transmission systems, distribution systems. Look at downtown Toronto, powered by a 4 kV system. It's kind of outdated and needs to be updated. And millions of dollars, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars needs to go into this infrastructure.
So that speaks to the notion that it didn't matter who was in power, these costs were going to have to be incurred.
I think on 2/3 of the problem, yes.
2/3. So the Liberals have to wear 1/3 of it.
Well,
then.
I think anybody involved in the space, and whether it's provincial politician, whatever party, I think there were some very tough decisions that were made and had to be made about the sector,
Gotcha.
and were made, and there are costs to them.
Sarah, then Steve.
Look, there's a long legacy spanning decades that has got us to where we are, and it is, I think there's political, there's, bureaucratic, there's all sorts of decision makers along the way that could share, quote unquote, the blame for this. And there's a lot of things that have been said. I do want to point on one thing that Brady said just about how, there hasn't been any change in the reliability of the power system. I distinctly remember, and I think a lot of people remember, where you were for the big blackout.
Ontario was totally exempted
Right.
from that. So, it had
well,
nothing,
I'm pretty sure that my lights didn't work for a couple of days.
Ontario was not blamed
So-
for that.
Ontario wasn't to blame.
No,
yes.
Ontario
So
wasn't to
that's-
blame,
so
but
that's-
it
sure
was
felt the
still,
impact.
That's a red
no,
herring.
it's not an Ontario system failure,
No.
but it was still where we got our electricity from. We still didn't have power, and I think we didn't have power then. We do have power now. Now, whether or not the decisions that were made to create that, and whether it be contracting of renewables, whether it be contracting of natural gas, whether it be contracting of nuclear, did we make all of the right choices around that? That could be said, but I just don't want us to end up in a place where we're having like a very elementary blame game
No, I
for something
understand.
that's
But tell me this.
intensely complex.
Let me see if we can get
Sure.
clarification on this, because I hear this every day. We pay the highest prices for electricity anywhere in North America.
That's not
True
true.
or false?
That's
False.
not true.
False? I hear false, false, false. Even the consumer guy says false.
Yeah, we've had some of the fastest rate increases in percentage terms, but not our rates still aren't higher than other places around North America.
No, if you look if you live in Toronto or you live in Ottawa, if you look at the price you pay per kilowatt hour, it's no different and quite often it's less than what you pay in New York or Chicago, very similar sized cities in the U.S. Where the trouble lies is what you were talking about earlier, and you have that bill for a Hydro One customer, which is maybe 300,000 of the customers, the 5 million
Sheldon,
customers.
bring that back up if you would.
In the
graphic form.
province. So it's a kind of a smaller section. You probably pay 25, 26 cents a kilowatt hour if you're a Hydro One low density customer. If you live in Toronto and you're a Toronto Hydro customer, you'll probably pay something like 16 cents a kilowatt hour, 17 cents. So there's a significant gap. So those customers in the rural feel, they feel they pay very high priced electricity. They do relative to urban customers.
Vince.
On top of Todd's, he's making a very good point. At the same time we've had this really large increase in bills going on, there's another policy that got layered on top. In the middle of 2015, the Ontario Energy Board decided we'd start to change the way distributors recover their costs. Distributors largely have fixed costs, but there was a variable component. So there was a mix of variable and fixed costs on bills. And for a variety of public policy reasons, the OEB decided that we should really move to have distributors recover costs in the way that reflects their actual costs. When you set up a house with poles and all the infrastructure that goes to deliver the electricity to your house, the distributor is unaffected by how much electricity you consume. Their costs are fixed. And so there are some customers in the province, in addition to all this focus, people started to focus their attention on the bills. And at the same time, we moved some customers from having a largely variable cost to a large fixed cost. And this is this other complaint that has come out. And it has affected some people in the province disproportionately. So there's certain low-income people in rural areas who now have this very high fixed cost on their bill. The distribution costs haven't changed, but this has gotten people's attention.
That's taking us nicely to the next part of our conversation, which we want to have, which is, okay, so what do we do about it? Here's where we are. Now what do we do about it? We know that the Liberals, for example, you referenced this earlier, they have taken the 8% part, the provincial portion of the harmonized sales tax, off of electricity bills. So everybody's bills have gone down 8%. We know as well that depending on how much money you make or maybe what part of the province you live in, you are eligible for some price mitigation programs that will also reduce the cost of the electricity you pay. Good. What else? Steve, what else could we do?
Cancel all the renewable contracts that can be canceled now.
They canceled 2 gas plants, and that ended up costing billions of dollars. So you really want to go down that road again?
That's a follow-on from another renewables policy, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ones that are not on the grid now. Cancel those because we absolutely do not need that.
How much does that cost?
I don't know what it costs. Whatever it costs, cancel them because it's costing our neighbors. We're beggaring our neighbors by bringing more of this stuff on. You're talking about costs in rural grids. It's people who are not for socioeconomic reasons who are shut out of the FIT program because they don't own property and can't put a solar panel on the roof, who are paying their neighbors' second stream of income. That's profoundly unfair.
Okay, the Ontario government has already done some of that, right? They have already canceled some of those contracts.
And start looking at ways to. We led off with the woman in Peterborough. She's actually doing what all of us should be doing. She's heating with the cleanest energy source. She doesn't have a choice, but she's heating with the cleanest energy source. Every kilowatt hour of the heat that she's using is coming with 10 to 20 grams of CO2, whereas her better off neighbors who can't afford natural gas are dumping 200 grams, 10 times that amount into the air. Well, people who have solar panels on their roofs, they should be required to heat with electricity. It's clean, green electricity, which is on the grid. Make them heat with it and use it for air conditioning.
We're going to go around here. Let's
and don't foist the costs onto their less better off neighbors.
Understand. So one of Steve Applin's ideas for getting the cost of electricity down is to cancel those renewable electricity contracts.
All the ones that are in the pipeline now and not on the grid, and look at the ones that are on the grid.
But you don't know how much that would save us actually at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, it certainly would put the brakes on cost increases.
Okay, Todd, what would you suggest?
Well, it's a very important topic. I think the policies offered by the province are important in the short term, and will take some short-term relief on bills. We have a lot of issues in the sector, common cost issues, and refurbishing nuclear power plants is an extremely expensive undertaking. I think what's required in Ontario is a transformation, not just taking these short-term, move away from a centralized command and control module that we have here in Ontario, where you have a centralized market operator, which is wheeling all these resources, large nuclear power plants, very expensive assets, very expensive to maintain. And we need to move towards a decentralized model where there's more generation behind the meter on the customer's premises, where it's efficient. There's no line losses. It's controlled by intelligent technology. It's cleaner. It's much more efficient. It puts communities back in charge.
How long would it take to ramp that up, Todd?
It started. Steve, it started. In 2010, there was very little generation behind the meter. And 2015, 2016, typically 3 to 5% of electricity is now generated behind the meter. Some municipalities in southwestern Ontario, it's as high as 10%. If you look at Toronto, Toronto's planning on building an energy center to allow these facilities to develop. They're thinking it's going to be as high as 12%.
What could that lower your electricity bill by?
I think what it would do is today you can get a solar panel and you can generate electricity at home for roughly 17 cents a kilowatt hour, the same cost as it is to get from the grid. What you do is you lock that cost in. Just as you said, you lock your cost in and you know on a go-forward basis, I'm going to be 17 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm not going to have to pay more, and I'm not subject to all the changes, the volatility in the market.
Sarah.
So I'm going to say to Steve, I don't think Ontarians are willing to take any more gambles. We've torn up contracts in the past, and we saw what that did to us. So I just don't think Ontarians are comfortable with the knee-jerk reaction that we've been taking to our electricity system planning. I think that we have to look at something a little bit more stable, a little bit more long-term. I'm more personally aligned with where Todd's going on this, but I also think that there are two things we have to do. There's the short-term problems that we have to address, and then there's the longer-term problems that we have to address. I think what Todd is talking about is a transition that's going to take place over time. Yes, it has started now, but I also think that Ontarians want to start seeing some sort of relief tomorrow. And politically, I think that a government that has to go to the polls in 17 months is going to want to deliver something sooner rather than later.
Like what? What could they do?
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk around this money around their cap and trade program and, you know, what they can do with the revenue sources. And so can they translate some of the sources of revenue that they're getting through that program and getting it into delivering programs to help people, you know, become more efficient where it's possible. It's not always possible. For some customers, they are already incredibly efficient. Like I would say, you know, a lot of the people in the area where I live, which is, you know, about an hour and a half northeast of Toronto, we're still on gas. We've got efficient furnaces. We've done, you know, insulation, windows, everything else, and we're still not seeing huge savings. But for some customers, that will work.
Let me follow up on that, because the last Ontario budget, I think, if memory serves, anticipated $1.9 billion in revenues to the Ontario Treasury through cap and trade.
Yep.
Are you saying take that money and just lower everybody's electricity bills with it?
So I'm not saying do it through a direct subsidy, but I am saying that they have promised as part of that $1.9 billion a number of programs. It's in the Climate Action Plan as a green bank, but it will, when it rolls out, I think it will look something a little bit different. But they have promised, particularly to the residential and small business customers, that they are going to help them try and find ways to reduce their consumptions and to reduce their bills.
In the near run.
In the near run. So the question that I have is, you know, is there an opportunity to look at those policies and see how those can help people, at least in part, reduce their bills? We also know that government has been having conversations we see in the media around, global adjustment factors, and can they change the way that they cost and price
Hold off
things?
on that. I'm going to come to that in a second. Okay, Vince, ideas. How do you
Steve,
lower the cost?
Three things. First is, on a go-forward basis, we have to change the governance structure of how we manage Electricity Ontario. It's number one on the list.
What does that mean?
Well, all the decisions, the big decisions for our system have been made politically, without enough input from the experts who know best how to manage our system. The average tenure of an energy minister in Ontario is 13 months. And these people have made billions and billions of dollars of decisions on our infrastructure. We need to change that model. So governance needs to change. The second thing is we need to accept that a lot of these costs are fixed, and they're not going to. So if anyone who comes forward and says, I have a magic solution, we're going to cancel, rates are not going to go down anytime soon. We've got a $26 billion nuclear refurbishment that's likely to proceed. So we need to help the poor. So I agree with Sarah here. We need to do something in the short term to help people to adjust these costs. If you look at our current program that we have running, the Ontario Energy Support Program, it's only reaching 30% of the 571,000 households that are eligible.
Why is that?
Because it's a sign-up process and there's difficulty getting people to sign up. The government needs to increase the amounts and increase the thresholds. The income level for a two-person household is $28,000. That's too low. We need to help more people. The third thing we need to think about is getting social costs out of our electricity system. We've had a history in Ontario of putting all the costs into rates. And in other jurisdictions, they don't necessarily do that. For example, in the US, there's subsidies for wind. When they want green energy, they get 2.3 cents a kilowatt hour through a federal program for some of the wind programs. So if you look down in New England, where they have a big mix of gas and wind, they have federal money. There's a good argument that we should take some of these social costs out. And the Ontario Energy Support Program, the program I just mentioned, is also funded in rates. So households and businesses are paying for this program. Well, that's really a social cost that's better funded through the tax base.
Are the feds involved in any of this so far?
Not currently, not here. So there's a good argument to make. If you do those three things, you can mitigate costs for those who are the poor and the vulnerable in our society.
Which ought to be our top priority.
Ought to be
anyway.
our top priority. And you can take social costs out of the system. That will lower bills. But there's no magic solution that's going to suddenly lower costs that I foresee in the near future.
I must say, I always wondered about the advisability of taking the 8% HST, provincial portion of the HST, off electricity bills, when the people who would benefit most from that are the people who use the most electricity and who have the biggest houses. Now, I mean, is it me, or does that just not really attack the problem as you've just described it?
Well, yeah, there is. There, you could probably have quite a few arguments. What's the best way to take social costs out and how to fund those? There might be an argument because a lot of the generation costs are based on what you use, and that's where we have some social, the greening, renewable. Those are, a social, societal benefit. There's an argument you could make that on a per kilowatt hour basis is a fair way to take some of those out. A lot of people would argue, that it's a disincentive to conservation. I don't think so. There's still enough.
Brady, your view, getting the costs down.
Yeah, so first I would say these programs of temporary rebates, Ontario Clean Energy Benefit, cutting HST, this is a shell game that it doesn't deal with any of the costs. On one hand, we're funding people to conserve. On the other hand, we're giving them rebates so they can consume more because their bill's lower. It's a total disaster from a policy point of view. It doesn't really make any sense. So I would not go down that road. The roads I would go down is one that Steve described. I think there's something like 23,000 contracts for power in Ontario. Some of those can be renegotiated, taxed, canceling. We've gone down that road, if that being not a very good idea, but certainly we can look at it. And secondly, I would look at the Ontario's conservation programs. Right now we're spending $2.6 billion between 2015 and 2020. People are conserving anyways. We have more power and we know what to do with. I think there's an easy way to cut $2.6 billion of costs right out of the system right now.
What's the global adjustment fee?
The global adjustment is this can that you kick everything in that you don't know what to do with. So we've promised generators, natural gas generators, nukes, everyone a certain rate, and then they sell their power on a market. The market price is really low because we have a lot of power. The global adjustment makes up that difference between what we promised them and what that power is worth in the market, as disorganized as the market is at this point in time.
Can the province revisit that rate?
There's been talk of it. I don't know how you go about doing it. There's talk of trying to spread some of the contracted costs over a longer period of time, but you're just kicking the can. You're still not dealing with the cost. The cost is still there. You're just extending the time in which you're going to pay them off.
Let me see if I can understand this better now, because on the one hand, If I use electricity, I'm a ratepayer. On the other hand, as a citizen of the province of Ontario, I'm a taxpayer. One of the arguments, I'm sort of reading between the lines here a bit, is that if I can take some of the costs as a ratepayer off my bill and move it onto the taxpayer bill, thus socializing some of these costs, my electricity bill might be smaller, my taxes might be higher to pay for all of that, but my electricity bill will be smaller. Am I robbing Peter to pay Paul, or am I getting further ahead in any of this? Steve, you start.
Yes. The problem that we have, the reason why we're all talking about this, is the cost that we have promised generators. That's the root cause of it. If we invent some other shell game, as Brady was saying, to spread the costs, to shift them off onto taxpayers who are ratepayers, I don't see how we're not. I don't see how we're adjusting or how we're addressing the problem. The problem is high rates. Problem is high rates, and we're beggaring our neighbors in order to make these high rates. That's patently unfair. So the issue that we can't go back and revisit some of these outrageous contracts, to me, is a little bit, poor guy who's got the solar panel on his roof, and we have to go back and he's beggaring his neighbor. And it's not fair that his neighbor's got to pay the cost.
So we should revisit those.
We should revisit them.
Okay. Todd, your view?
Steve, we have lots of people show up every week to try and pay a bill. They're fighting to pay a bill. They would argue any benefit they can get in the short term is welcome. And they probably don't think whether it's a transfer from the electricity sector to the tax sector. They just need help, and they want it now. So I think that those programs are important. I think we've talked about some of the midterm solutions and optimization of the market, and that's very important, that we get more efficient and generators much more closely match what's the demand for electricity in the provinces. We're more efficient from that perspective. Long term, though, we have to transform the sector, and it's a fundamental change, and it's the only way we're going to bend this cost curve permanently. If we continue with the current approach, no, costs will continue to increase significantly, and we'll be continuing to be in this discussion. Should the tax base pay for it, or the electricity customers? So without that major transformation, I see no improvement in costs.
Do you think there is an argument to be made that there are some costs connected to electricity which actually society as a whole has an interest in, and therefore it actually makes policy sense? You're a policy advisor. Mm-hmm. It makes policy sense to remove those costs from the ratepayer and put them on the backs of the taxpayer.
So I think, rather than saying on the backs of the taxpayer, I think it's one of the things that the government has to consider. I do think that there are social benefits that have been made in the electricity system that everybody has enjoyed. But the thing is that it's, you don't necessarily want to socialize those costs and then raise taxes to pay for them. If you were to design our electricity system today, it would look nothing like how it is now. Our current system is ridiculously inefficient. It's like saying, if we were going to create a phone system today, would we run power lines or would we just run mobile networks? Like, the rate of technology has just moved so far beyond where we actually are today that I think that's why Todd's talking about, system modernization and changing the way that we procure energy and electricity. Those are all great things. But, I think the government has to make a calculation and should make a calculation where it makes sense that some things, right? So for example, maybe you move conservation and the idea of we're going to do things to lower our bills and save, energy and electricity because that's a benefit to all. Maybe they decide to move that off because they've already got programs lined up through their cap and trade program that are going to further support conservation and efficiency. Maybe that's an excellent example of something that would work.
That's our time, everybody. I suspect we could go on and we have more good ideas at this table. However, I do note that on the Minister of Energy's schedule, in the days ahead, he has a public speech coming up, a noontime speech at one of those, I forget if it's the Empire Club, Canadian Club, Economic Club, one of those clubs. And I wonder if he's going to reveal some of what we have discussed here today as the short-term solution for what ails our electricity prices in the province of Ontario now. I thank all of you for coming in tonight and sharing your ideas on this important subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.